Joel Goldsmith discovered something so revolutionary that traditional denominations attempted to silence him. This wasn't theology or doctrine. It was a living practice that produced documented healings without rituals, prayers of supplication, or religious intermediaries. What he revealed threatened the foundation of institutional control over spiritual power. The knowledge Goldsmith shared came from direct mystical experience, not scriptural interpretation. He taught that every person possesses an inner connection to divine consciousness that requires no external validation. Religious authorities recognized this teaching would make their hierarchies obsolete. People would no longer need permission to access healing power. This hidden knowledge transforms how you relate to divine presence. Instead of begging an external deity for intervention, you recognize the infinite already flowing through your consciousness. Goldsmith called this the practice of recognition. When you truly recognize what you already are, healing happens naturally without effort or struggle. Traditional religion teaches you are separate from divine power and must earn divine favor through obedience and ritual. Goldsmith shattered this illusion completely. He demonstrated that separation exists only in human belief, never in spiritual reality. Your consciousness is already one with infinite intelligence, infinite life, infinite wholeness right now. Denominations condemn this teaching because it eliminated their role as gatekeepers. If you can access healing consciousness directly, why would you need institutional approval? Goldsmith's students experienced physical healings, financial transformations, and relationship restorations without joining organizations or following dogmatic requirements. The secret lies in a practice Goldsmith called resting in omnipresence. You stop mentally reaching for something external, and instead become still enough to recognize what is already present within consciousness. This stillness dissolves the illusion of separation that creates all human suffering and limitation. Goldsmith taught that divine consciousness is not a person who judges, rewards, or punishes. It is the infinite, invisible presence that constitutes your true being. When you recognize this presence as closer than your own breath, transformation occurs without petitioning or pleading. You simply rest in what already is. Religious authorities attacked this teaching as heresy because it removed fear as a control mechanism. If divine presence is already complete within you, judgment and condemnation become impossible. Goldsmith freed thousands from spiritual manipulation by revealing that grace is not earned but recognized. Your wholeness already exists. This recognition practice works immediately when you stop trying to change external conditions and instead become aware of the consciousness observing those conditions. That awareness itself is divine presence. It has never been sick, lacking, or broken. When you identify as this awareness, rather than as a struggling human personality, your experience begins reflecting wholeness. The complete practice Goldsmith revealed consists of 3 simple movements of consciousness. First, stop all mental arguing with conditions and become completely still. Second, recognize that infinite intelligence is already present as your own awareness. Third, rest in this recognition without trying to make anything happen or change. Denominations tried discrediting this practice because it produces results without their institutional frameworks. Students reported chronic illnesses disappearing after weeks of consistent recognition practice. Financial lack transformed as they stopped mentally fighting poverty and instead rested in the consciousness of infinite supply already present. Goldsmith warned this practice requires patience and consistency. You are undoing years of conditioned thinking that believes in separation from good. Some experience immediate shifts. Others practice for months before major breakthroughs occur. The key is daily recognition without demanding specific outcomes or timelines. Margaret had suffered rheumatoid arthritis for 12 years when she discovered Goldsmith's hidden practice. Every morning her hands were so swollen she could not hold a coffee cup. Doctors offered only pain management and warned her condition would progressively worsen. Traditional prayers had brought temporary comfort but no lasting healing. She began practicing recognition daily, sitting in stillness for 20 minutes each morning. Instead of praying for healing, she recognized that divine consciousness already knows no inflammation or pain. For 3 weeks, nothing changed physically. Her mind screamed that the practice was not working. Goldsmith had taught this resistance was normal. In week 4, Margaret noticed slight improvement in her morning stiffness. By week 8, the swelling had decreased noticeably. After 4 months of consistent practice, her rheumatologist documented significant reduction in inflammation markers. Within 1 year, she was medication-free with full mobility restored. Her healing came not from petitioning, but from recognizing wholeness already present. David faced bankruptcy after his business partner embezzled funds and disappeared. He had prayed desperately for financial rescue but felt abandoned by divine help. When he encountered Goldsmith's teaching, he initially dismissed it as too simple to address his crisis. How could mere recognition solve legal problems and creditor demands? Goldsmith taught that recognition practice does not ignore practical action, but transforms the consciousness from which action flows. David began daily stillness practice, recognizing infinite intelligence as the substance of his own awareness. He stopped mentally fighting the financial situation, and instead rested in consciousness that knows no lack or limitation. Within 2 weeks, unexpected solutions began appearing. A former client offered a consulting contract that covered immediate expenses. An attorney offered pro bono help restructuring his debts. Within 6 months, David had rebuilt his business on a stronger foundation. The external solutions flowed from his transformed internal state of consciousness. Sarah's marriage had deteriorated into constant conflict and emotional distance. Years of couples counseling had produced temporary improvements, followed by deeper resentment. She prayed for her husband to change, but felt her prayers bounced off the ceiling. When she learned Goldsmith's recognition practice, she understood why her prayers had failed. Goldsmith taught that praying for someone to change reinforces the illusion of their imperfection. Recognition practice involves seeing the other person as divine consciousness already complete and whole. Sarah began recognizing her husband's true spiritual nature, rather than focusing on his personality flaws and defensive behaviors. Her husband never knew about her practice, yet within weeks he began initiating deeper conversations. The defensiveness gradually softened. Within 4 months, they experienced a genuine renewal of emotional intimacy. Sarah's recognition of his spiritual wholeness somehow awakened that wholeness in his actual behavior. This mystified her rational mind but demonstrated the power Goldsmith had discovered. Thomas had struggled with chronic anxiety and overwhelming mental turmoil for years, despite various therapeutic approaches. He felt spiritually disconnected and questioned whether peace was even possible for someone with his racing thoughts. Traditional religious answers about having more faith only deepened his sense of inadequacy and spiritual failure. Goldsmith's teaching offered a completely different approach. Instead of fighting anxious thoughts or praying for them to stop, Thomas learned to recognize the consciousness aware of anxiety. That awareness itself was never anxious, never overwhelmed, never lacked peace. As he practiced identifying as awareness rather than as turbulent thoughts and feelings, something fundamental shifted. The mental turmoil did not vanish overnight. But within 2 months, Thomas noticed longer periods of inner stillness between anxious episodes. By 6 months, the anxiety had lost its controlling grip on his daily experience. He still experienced challenging thoughts occasionally, but they no longer defined him. Recognition practice had revealed his true nature as consciousness itself, untouched by mental chaos. If these transformation stories of ordinary people experiencing extraordinary healing inspire you, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's hidden knowledge. Subscribe for more mystical wisdom that denominations tried to suppress, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your own spiritual journey. Beyond basic recognition practice, Goldsmith taught a complementary technique he called divine indifference. This does not mean apathy toward life circumstances. Divine indifference means recognizing that infinite consciousness remains undisturbed by human drama and chaos. When you identify as that consciousness, external conditions lose their power to disturb your peace. Most people live in constant reaction to circumstances, believing their peace depends on conditions improving. Goldsmith revealed this gives conditions power they do not actually possess. Your essential nature as consciousness cannot be touched by external events. When you recognize this truth consistently, you stop being controlled by the shifting landscape of life. Practice divine indifference by noticing when circumstances trigger emotional reactivity. In that moment, recognize the awareness observing the trigger. That awareness is already at peace, already complete. As you rest in that awareness, the emotional charge dissolves. This does not make you cold or uncaring, but frees you from being controlled by external chaos. Goldsmith also taught a practice called listening for the still, small voice. This differs from traditional prayer where you speak to an external deity. In listening practice, you become completely silent and receptive, allowing divine intelligence to inform your consciousness. This intelligence often arrives as sudden knowing, peaceful certainty, or intuitive guidance. Many students initially struggle with this practice because their minds produce constant mental chatter. Goldsmith emphasized that the still small voice speaks beneath the noise of thinking. You access it not by controlling thoughts, but by recognizing the silence that exists underneath all mental activity. That silence is divine presence, communicating wholeness and guidance. Practice listening by setting aside 10 minutes daily for complete internal silence. Do not try to hear specific messages or answers. Simply rest in receptive stillness. Over weeks of practice, you begin noticing subtle guidance arising naturally. This guidance often comes as you go about daily activities, when your mind has released its demanding grip on outcomes. Another powerful technique Goldsmith shared involves recognizing divine government in all situations. This means understanding that infinite intelligence is the only true power operating in your life circumstances. Human plotting, manipulation, and interference cannot ultimately obstruct what divine intelligence is unfolding through your experience. When you encounter obstacles or opposition, practice recognizing divine government at work. This does not mean passive acceptance of injustice. It means refusing to give human interference ultimate power over your good. Divine intelligence knows perfect solutions that your limited human perspective cannot yet see. Recognition of this truth allows those solutions to emerge. Students using this practice reported remarkable experiences of obstacles dissolving without their direct intervention. Legal problems resolved unexpectedly. Difficult people transferred to other departments. Financial resources appeared through completely unanticipated channels. Divine government operates through infinite avenues beyond human manipulation or control when you recognize it as the only real power. Goldsmith's final complementary technique involves practicing impersonal love. Traditional religion teaches you should love everyone equally, then leaves you feeling guilty when you cannot manufacture loving feelings toward difficult people. Impersonal love is completely different. It recognizes the divine nature in everyone without requiring emotional warmth or personal affection. You practice impersonal love by silently recognizing that even people who harm or oppose you are divine consciousness in essence, regardless of their current behavior or level of spiritual awareness. This recognition does not condone harmful actions. It simply refuses to give ultimate reality to their personality distortions and unconscious behaviors. This practice produces extraordinary results in relationships. As you consistently recognize someone's divine nature, something in them often responds by expressing more of that nature. Your recognition becomes a silent invitation for their wholeness to emerge. This happens without words, manipulation, or personal effort. Recognition itself is the transformative power Goldsmith discovered. The most common obstacle students face is mental resistance disguised as rational doubt. Your conditioned thinking insists that recognition practice is too simple to solve complex problems. This doubt feels intellectually sophisticated, but actually protects the ego's investment in struggle and effort. Goldsmith warned that the simplicity of recognition threatens the mind's need to feel important. When doubt arises, do not fight it or try to believe harder. Instead, recognize the awareness observing the doubt. That awareness is not doubting anything. It simply observes doubt arising and passing like clouds across the sky. As you rest in that observing awareness, doubt loses its convincing power without you needing to argue with it intellectually. Students who push through this doubt phase consistently report breakthrough experiences within weeks. The rational mind eventually tires of its own resistance when you stop feeding it with attention and argument. Your willingness to practice despite doubt demonstrates commitment to truth rather than to comfortable mental patterns. Another major obstacle involves impatience for visible results. You practice recognition for days or weeks, see no external change, and conclude the practice is not working. Goldsmith taught that this impatience reveals attachment to outcomes rather than genuine recognition of what already is. You are still trying to use recognition as a technique to manipulate conditions. True recognition practice means resting in awareness of wholeness without demanding that wholeness appear in specific forms or time frames. The practice itself is the demonstration, not a means to some future demonstration. When you grasp this distinction, pressure and urgency dissolve. You practice from peace rather than from desperate need. Students who release timeline expectations often experience sudden breakthroughs after months of seemingly fruitless practice. The practice was working all along at consciousness level, restructuring deep patterns of separation belief. External manifestation follows internal transformation, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly. Your job is recognition, not controlling how wholeness appears in form. Many encounter an obstacle Goldsmith called treatment disease. This happens when you turn recognition practice into another form of mental manipulation, trying to think the right thoughts to produce desired outcomes. You practice recognition while secretly believing you are making something happen through correct mental technique. This subtle manipulation blocks genuine transformation. Goldsmith emphasized that recognition is not a mental technique you perform, but a spiritual reality you acknowledge. Divine consciousness is already present, already whole, already perfect. You are not creating this reality through your practice. You are simply removing the mental static that obscures your awareness of reality already present. The cure for treatment disease is relaxing all effort to make recognition work or produce results. Practice becomes effortless acknowledgement rather than strained mental labor. You recognize wholeness the way you recognize the sun exists, without trying to make it shine brighter through your recognition. This relaxed acknowledgement allows transformation to unfold naturally. The final major obstacle involves mistaking emotional highs for genuine recognition. You finish a practice session feeling peaceful and inspired, then assume you have achieved true spiritual awareness. When the emotional high fades and problems remain, you feel disappointed and confused. Goldsmith warned that authentic recognition transcends emotional states completely. True recognition occurs at consciousness level beyond emotion. Your feelings may be peaceful or disturbed, but the awareness recognizing those feelings remains undisturbed in either case. When you identify as that awareness rather than as emotional states, you access stability that does not depend on how you feel in any given moment. Practice recognizing awareness during difficult emotional states, not only during peaceful ones. Notice that even intense emotion is observed by consciousness that remains untouched. This recognition during challenge develops spiritual muscle far more effectively than recognition during easy, pleasant circumstances. Your consistency during difficulty determines depth of transformation. If these obstacle-dissolving techniques speak to challenges you face in spiritual practice, like to support this content reaching others who struggle, subscribe for advanced Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which obstacle you are ready to transform through recognition right now. Advanced integration begins when you practice recognition during intense life challenges, not only during quiet meditation. When crisis hits, your conditioned response is mental panic and frantic problem-solving. Goldsmith taught that these moments offer the greatest opportunity for demonstrating recognition practice. Your willingness to rest in awareness during chaos proves genuine spiritual development. Linda faced this test when doctors discovered a suspicious mass requiring immediate biopsy. Her mind screamed with fear and worst-case scenarios. Instead of suppressing the fear, she recognized the awareness observing fear. That awareness knew no cancer, no threat, no mortality. She practiced this recognition throughout medical procedures and waiting periods. The biopsy revealed benign tissue, but Linda's real transformation was not the medical outcome. She discovered that recognition practice actually works during genuine crisis, not only during calm meditation. This realization gave her unshakable confidence in consciousness as her foundation. She had proven to herself that recognition is not philosophical theory but living spiritual power. Advanced practice also involves recognizing divine presence in people who trigger your judgment and criticism. Your coworker who takes credit for your work, your relative who constantly criticizes, your neighbor whose dog barks all night. These people test whether recognition is genuine or merely pleasant spiritual fantasy you maintain when life cooperates. Goldsmith taught that the people who irritate you most are spiritual teachers, offering the exact lessons you need. Their behavior reveals where you still believe in separation and imperfection as reality. When you recognize their divine nature despite their unconscious behavior, you free yourself from the prison of judgment and reactivity. Practice this by silently recognizing divine consciousness as the truth of difficult people, while taking any necessary practical action to protect your boundaries. Recognition does not mean tolerating abuse. It means refusing to give ultimate reality to someone's current level of unconsciousness. This combination of spiritual recognition and practical wisdom is advanced integration. The workplace offers constant opportunity for advanced recognition practice. Your income depends on conditions you cannot fully control. Competition, politics, and economic forces create pressure and anxiety. Traditional religious people pray for job security and promotions. Goldsmith taught a radically different approach that transforms work into spiritual practice. Recognize that divine intelligence is the only employer, the only source of your supply and opportunity. Human companies and bosses are simply channels through which infinite supply flows. When you recognize this truth consistently, your relationship to work transforms. You stop living in fear of human approval or disapproval because you know consciousness itself sustains you. Students practicing workplace recognition report remarkable experiences. Toxic bosses suddenly transfer. Unexpected promotions appear. New opportunities emerge from impossible situations. These results flow not from manipulating conditions, but from recognizing the infinite intelligence already governing your professional life. Divine government operates whether you recognize it or not, but recognition removes your resistance to its perfect unfolding. The ultimate advanced practice involves maintaining recognition during physical pain and illness. Your body screams that something is wrong. Medical tests confirm abnormalities. Everyone around you reinforces the reality of your condition. Goldsmith taught that these circumstances demand your deepest recognition that consciousness knows no disease or deterioration. This practice is not denial of symptoms or refusal of medical care. It is recognition that the consciousness you actually are has never been sick and cannot become sick. While addressing symptoms appropriately at the physical level, you simultaneously recognize your true nature as awareness that observes but is not touched by bodily sensations. Advanced practitioners reported that this dual approach, practical medical care combined with consistent recognition of spiritual wholeness, produced accelerated healing and sometimes complete resolution of supposedly incurable conditions. The physical and spiritual are not separate realms but different dimensions of one reality. Recognition at consciousness level often manifests as improved conditions at body level, though this is not the goal of practice. Total transformation means living from recognition as your natural state, not as a special practice you perform during meditation. You recognize divine presence while washing dishes, stuck in traffic, balancing accounts, and navigating relationship conflicts. Recognition becomes the very ground of your moment-to-moment experience, rather than an occasional spiritual exercise. This shift happens gradually through consistent practice over months and years. You notice one day that you automatically recognize awareness during stress rather than collapsing into reactive thinking. You find yourself naturally resting in stillness rather than constant mental striving. What once required deliberate effort has become your default mode of consciousness. Goldsmith called this living by grace rather than by law. You are no longer using spiritual techniques to manage life challenges. You are simply being who you truly are, consciousness itself expressing through human form. From this foundation, right action flows naturally without forced effort. Problems still arise, but you meet them from peace rather than from panic. Transformed consciousness also means recognizing that nothing external can ultimately harm or diminish you. Loss of money, relationships, health, or reputation cannot touch your essential nature as infinite awareness. This recognition does not make you indifferent to life. It makes you genuinely free to fully engage without desperate attachment to outcomes. People living from this recognition appear remarkably peaceful regardless of external circumstances. They grieve losses without being destroyed by grief. They celebrate successes without clinging to them desperately. They face uncertainty with quiet confidence because they know their foundation is consciousness itself, not the shifting landscape of conditions. This freedom attracts abundance naturally. When you stop clutching life in desperate need, life flows toward you effortlessly. Opportunities appear, resources materialize, relationships deepen, not because you manipulated consciousness correctly, but because you removed the constriction of fear-based grasping. You become a clear channel for infinite intelligence to express through your unique life experience. Your transformed perspective also revolutionizes how you view suffering and challenges. What once seemed like terrible problems or divine punishment, you now recognize as opportunities for deeper recognition practice. Every difficulty becomes an invitation to discover whether your foundation is truly consciousness or still depends on external conditions cooperating. Goldsmith taught that the spiritual path is not about eliminating all challenges, but about transforming your relationship to challenge. You stop asking why bad things happen, and instead recognize that consciousness remains whole regardless of what appears to happen. This shift in perspective dissolves the victim mentality that creates so much human suffering. Advanced students often express gratitude for past difficulties that force them to discover recognition practice. What seemed like the worst thing that ever happened became the catalyst for their greatest spiritual development. This paradoxical gratitude is not masochism, but genuine recognition that all experiences serve awakening when met with conscious awareness rather than unconscious reaction. You now possess the hidden knowledge that denominations tried to discredit because it threatens institutional control over spiritual power. Goldsmith revealed what mystics have always known. You are divine consciousness itself, not a separate individual who must earn connection to divinity. Recognition of this truth is the secret that heals, transforms, and liberates. Practice this recognition consistently, not as occasional spiritual luxury, but as your primary relationship to life itself. Begin with 10 minutes daily of silent stillness, recognizing awareness as your true nature. Extend recognition into challenging moments throughout your day. Over weeks and months, watch your entire experience transform from the inside out. The transformation may unfold gradually or suddenly, but it will unfold if you persist in recognition regardless of appearances. You are not trying to become whole. You are recognizing the wholeness you already are and have always been. This recognition is the spiritual power denominations could not control and therefore tried to suppress. If your understanding of spiritual reality has expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets that institutions tried to hide, like this video to spread this liberating knowledge, subscribe for more transformative mystical teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to affirm your recognition of divine consciousness as your true nature.